I'm glad you guys could all join us. We've done a lot of virtual classes in the last year, and before that, a lot of in-person classes. And this is the first time we're doing both virtual and in-person events for one of our festivals. So, really glad to be able to interact with everyone in all these various ways.
Yeah, it's great that you guys have been able to, kind of do the meld of the two, since obviously
Yeah,
Folklore Village had never done virtual classes. Everything was always in person, and then obviously
right.
a quick veer to everything virtual,
Mm-hmm.
and now yay variants.
Right.
Now we can do a mix of the two and do it safely.
Definitely. Yeah, it definitely throws a wrench in how we've always done things, but it means now we have new ways to interact with people, and we can meet with people who are all over the world when
Hmm.
maybe we would have only had people here in the Midwest that were able to come to some events.
Absolutely. One of the shinier parts of the internet.
Right. Well, if you want to go ahead and get started, if our last participant pops up, I will let them in. Otherwise, I don't have anything else to say. Thank you guys all for being here.
All right, so I'm Jay with RedBarn Catering. I've always catered all the meals for Folklore Village, and when they're doing an event that I can't be there to make the food, I teach classes for them. So um, yeah, for this one, for our Swedish class, we are going to be making a Swedish yellow pea soup, which is very traditional, as well as Gubbrora, which is kind of an egg salad that has uh, basically, for now, we'll just say fish in it. We'll get more into that later. It's a little hilariously complicated, but for now, my last note on Gubbrora will be that you can call it either old man's mix or gentleman's delight. And I have a feeling that one gender came up with old man's mix and the other gender came up with gentleman's delight, because they're a bit different, but um, the things that you read in in similar books that have a completely different name for it. One of the reasons that I wanted to do the yellow pea soup is not only because it's very traditionally Swedish, but also it's just a great soup to kind of show you just some general good rules of thumb to have when you're making a soup. So I've got my camera here pointed down, so I won't be doing a whole lot of presentation like this. A lot of it you'll be looking down, but whenever, if this is just going away and cooking away and I've got some questions to answer or something, I'll switch the view back up. But the way I generally like the class to go is, if you have a question, just unmute yourself and just blurt out your question, speak up. And if you're not comfortable doing that, or you just don't want to interrupt or something, you can just type it into the chat, and then Kelly will be able to relay that to me. So yeah, without further ado, let's go on with our soup. So the first thing that I am going to say is I'm going to cheat a tiny bit, because although I do have the these wonderful Swedish whole dried yellow peas here, these do actually take about a full hour to get the perfect amount of cooked and just sort of dissolving, falling apart, giving some nice body to the soup. So since we really only have an hour to work with, what I have done many times is just using yellow split peas. I actually did that years ago. That's what I always did before I ever found that you can actually get these peas at places like Open House Imports in Mount Horeb. You actually can get them locally. So it is a slightly different soup, but you really get the essence of it using the split piece here. And it's really just going to help us cut down on time and get through that today. So we will look down into the pot here where I've got some butter There we go. I've got some butter already in here, ready to go. You'll see the white space here is just my cutting board. I have to have the camera offset a little bit because once I get liquid in there, it'll just completely fog up our lens there. So it just offset a little for that reason. All right, so grab my wooden spoon here. I've got my butter. I've got my diced bacon. And that's always just a great place to start with a soup. Just getting, you know, not only some fat in there, but starting off with that bacon, it's going to give us a nice meaty base from the very beginning. You don't have to use bacon. You can just use the butter or olive oil, you know, whatever your oil of choice is there. And obviously, when you're frying bacon, the butter is really not necessary. Obviously, you can do this with just the bacon, and this fat will be enough, so you don't need the butter in there. But of course, when you're making, you know, amazing, delicious foods like this, need isn't always the question. You know, we're gonna get that delicious butter flavor. We're gonna get that bacon fat in there, and they're both just gonna kind of wrap those flavors around each other and get into all that other great stuff that we're gonna throw in there. So we're just gonna let this get, you know, not super crispy. We don't want it to burn or anything, but we also want it to be able to, you know, have some good color, get that nice Maillard reaction in there. That Maillard reaction is that browning you get on the outside of the meat, and that is a delicious chemical reaction, turning those meat sugars into those delicious, complex flavors. You can see we're almost there already. I'm getting just a little tiny bit more smoke than I might like. So I'm turning it down just a little bit, but we are seconds away from being there. And then to this, that's looking real good now. Very nice. Right to that, we're gonna throw, I've got our chopped onion here ready to go. Just throw that right in. You can see why I've got the camera offset just a little bit, just to help you see. Now, when you do this, if you can see, there's these brown spots on the bottom of the pan. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shut the heat off for just a moment. So that is actually, you know, some people get worried like, oh no, it's burning to the bottom. Well, technically, just a little bit. It is burning to the bottom just a little bit, but it wasn't black at all. That was just some nice browning on the bottom. And that's what, you know, we fancy French chefs like to call the fond that you get in the bottom. So when you're making a pan sauce or something and you get all those brown bits stuck to the bottom of the pan, that's the fond, and you can add a liquid to that, and that will, you know, release that fond and then, you know, help you make a sauce. For this, there's so much moisture that just started coming out of these onions that just letting it sit here, all that brown fond that was there, you can see now, just those few seconds, and the moisture from the onions is taking that right off. Now all that delicious brown fond that was on the bottom of the pan from that bacon, now all that flavor is just right in our onions. The pan is nice and clean in the bottom, and we can get the heat right back on again. And you can see we've got some great color on the onions already. A lot of that is from that fond, but we want to make sure that we actually do cook them a little bit more. At this point, I'm going to throw in, I got some ginger here that I just put, I keep my ginger in the freezer. And then all I need to do when I want to use it is just get it out, scrape off with the back of a spoon. You know, wherever the end is, just scrape off on the outsides the skin, and then I can grab my microplane and just grate, zest off as much as I need and throw it right back in the freezer. And I mean, I've never had ginger go bad in the freezer. I mean, I go through a fair amount of it, but it lasts real well in the freezer. Keep it in a Ziploc bag. It's good to go. Another great thing about, well, a great way to release those flavors of the ginger is to saute it. Which is one of the reasons I want to make sure we put it in now. I've got some peeled garlic cloves in my garlic press right here. I do love Anthony Bourdain, but I know if you saw me using a garlic press today, he would not be happy with me. But you know what? We're making soup. We don't need to mince it and use some salt in the back of a knife to turn it into a paste. And that would take a good 3 minutes to do that with you know, those 2-3 cloves that we just used. And obviously a garlic press, squeeze, done. For soup, that is just fine. So if you ever see a recipe for soup and it just starts with, like, you know, boil water, add vegetables, you know, probably not the greatest recipe. You know, you can kind of go off on your own there and say, well, it's got some onions, it's got some garlic in there, maybe some celery or something. You know, I'm going to give it some color, brown that off first, and that's going to give you a much more richer, more complex soup. Now at this point, I don't necessarily want to fry the onions where, you know, you really get that, like, those dark brown, almost black edges on the onions. You know, these are just that beautiful translucent, getting some very light browning from there. You can see we're getting a little more fond build up there. Not a problem, as long as we, you know, we don't let it turn black, then we're good. All right, so we've added, at this point, we have our bacon, our butter, our onion, ginger, garlic, and we've got everything just how we want it. At this point, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in, I've got our diced celeriac, which is one of my favorite vegetables. I mean, it's basically this, it's a celery root, and it's just earthy, sweet, magnificent. I mean, make it like with mashed, like treat it like mashed potatoes, and just puree it. It's awesome. We've got our leeks here. Didn't need too much here, so I didn't even need to get into the greens. And from this, at this point, I'm just going to throw our peas and our rosemary and our bay leaf in. And I'm going to go ahead and add our stock right now. I already had that stock warmed up, ready to go. This is, I pulled this out of the freezer. A lot of times when I make chicken, I'll braise the chicken over a bed of onions and garlic, with a bunch of herbs under there, in some, an unoaked Chardonnay that I just bring up to a simmer just to take that edge off. And then I braise the chicken in that. And not only does it make a wonderful sauce, but it makes more chicken jus than I need to make the sauce. So I always wind up with extra, this amazing chicken jus that I just keep putting in the freezer. And then when I got to make a soup or something, I can just pull it out. And it's just, that's already amazing. So.
Hey, Jay, what did you put in after the rosemary?
The bay leaf?
Oh, bay leaf. Okay, thanks.
Yep, it's just that one bay leaf. Bay leaves are one of those things that, you know, I guess, yeah, I'll just pause just to say that, I mean, this is going to simmer for a while now. The recipe says for an hour. That's for, you know, those whole Swedish peas. And really, I mean, I'll switch the view here. For these split peas, I mean, to get them so they're the good fall apart tender where we want them, you know, probably about 25 minutes to a half an hour to really get them all the way there. I use timers for everything, and it's not because I you know, feel the need to like monitor everything. I use timers just to like get it out of my head. If I don't have a timer, I'm gonna keep coming over and like checking it, poking it. Even with like pasta, I'll even look at the box and say like, all right, well, it takes like 7 minutes to be done. I'll set a timer for 6, just for those 6 minutes. I'll walk by it, I'll give it a little stir or something. But until the timer goes off, I know that I don't need to be over there and like checking the noodle over and over again to make sure that it's good. So, you know, I set timers for stuff like this, you know, before it'll be done, just letting me know. Until then, you know, poke it, give it a little stir, but you don't need to like babysit it and everything. Once the timer goes off, you know, like, all right, well, now it's getting close. Obviously, something like hard-boiled eggs or rice that you really want the time to be exact. I mean, well, that's different. Set it for the exact right time, and when it goes off, pull it off. But for things like, you know, soup or, you know, pasta, stuff like that, I set timers just so I know, well, I don't need to keep it in my head. Timer's doing that. All right, so I'll just set it for 20 minutes. And then I know that this is just going to kind of be just doing its thing, and I don't really need to worry about it. And I'm going to, ooh, that's warm. I'm going to very carefully pick up my burner and move it. So we're going to leave this at a nice simmer. I guess I can give you one last look at it. So that's going just, I wanted to show you that it's going a little more than I want it right now. I know some people, when they're making soup, they just turn it on a boil and just let it roar away, just boiling. Now, there's, you know, when we got, you know, all these wonderful flavors already in there, I mean, you know, if you just boil it too high, like that, that's still more than I want. We want a rapid simmer. There we go. If you boil it too much, I mean, you're just going to turn some of these wonderful flavors just into mud. You're just going to boil them away. We want to release the flavors that are in there and get that, not only, you know, enhance it in itself, but to, you know, flavor our stock, which is already amazing, but, you know, why not make it even better? But like right there, I mean, if not just a tiny bit more, I mean, that's where I like to see it. So you've got the bubbles moving, you know, it's plenty hot, you know, it's going to be good. I'm going to carefully move this. All right. Okay, so that's going to do its thing. You know, stir it every 5 minutes or so just to make sure that nothing is sticking to the bottom, but you really don't need to babysit it. It's one of the nice things about not having it just roaring away boiling. You don't need to worry about it boiling over or burning. So at this point, while that's just doing its thing, I want to jump over and make our Gubbrora, and or our, we'll call it old man's mix, just because that's more fun. So again, it's very similar to an egg salad, and one of the reasons that I love this one is it's very different. Not only does it have traditionally ansjovis, which I'll get into more in a minute, which is, you know, a fish. It's got a lot of recipes call for callus caviar, which is a smoked cod spread that, you know, they love to just like put on toast and stuff like that. I mean, I've got, there it is. You know, you can see on there, there's this, on my, it's, I don't know, my hand up, there we go. It looks like it's got a glare, but yes, this happy blonde child eating his callus caviar on a piece of toast. It's really pretty good stuff, and it makes, you know, your egg salad, you know, very unique. It's, I mean, not only does it have, you know, the onion in it, which is not uncommon, so it's a good strong flavor there, but with the fish, it's got capers, you know, the fresh herbs. It very commonly does have creme fraiche. They're very fond of using creme fraiche in Sweden. And there's some recipes have creme fraiche, a few have sour cream, a lot of them have mayonnaise. Today I'm going to use mayonnaise just because I'm going to keep it dairy free for anybody that might have an allergy for it. I'm going to be actually serving this tomorrow at the festival. And yeah, it's really a very unique and very different sort of take on egg salad. So I'm going to throw on a pair of gloves real quick. And I hilariously have a single large glove left in that box. So this medium will have to squeeze on just a little bit tighter. All right. So I've got my mise en place here, all ready to go. So, there's really no order of operations here or anything. Nothing's getting cooked. It's egg salad basically, so everything just goes in together. So that's what I'm going to do now. I've got everything ready to go. Let's mix it up. I started off, I just put the mayo in this bowl. There we go. Just because that will make it easier to start with. Okay. So for starters, I'm just going to put in our eggs, and all I've ever done for egg salad eggs is I just put them in a slicer, and then I just turn it 90 degrees and put it in again. And that is always done fine by me. For these eggs, I just, you can see in the directions, there's 100 different ways you can make hard-boiled eggs. My favorite way to do it is basically just put your cold eggs from the fridge into the bottom of a pot. It works best if that pot is full of eggs in that bottom single layer, so it's not heaping up and there's a bunch of eggs on the bottom and then one egg on top of that, and so you need to add a whole lot of extra water. If your eggs fill up the bottom of the pan just perfectly in a single layer, and then you just barely top that with water so they are fully covered, just turn your stovetop all the way up, and then you can once you see it start to boil, turn it down to a simmer and set a timer for 9 minutes. As soon as that 9 minutes is up, shock it cold and they'll be perfect. I mean, you can see these are, they're cooked perfectly all the way through. Let's see if it's going to adjust. Hopefully it's focused for you. For me, it's a little washed out, but there's not that gray or green ring around the outside. They're just perfect. Okay, so I've got our mayo, our hard-boiled eggs. I'm going to chop up this onion. I'm sure you all know how to chop an onion, but it's a nice thing to be able to do efficiently without having to go over it in a sloppy sort of way. So I'll show you how to do that in a minute. For our capers, what I do is I like to use the small capers and then just give them a really quick rough chop. I mean, I spent about probably 5 to 7 seconds just giving these a really quick chop just to break them up a little bit. Here we've got our pickled herring, which we are using in place of our sprats. And I suppose, well, I'll get everything in. It's a very entertaining sort of thing here with the pickled, or the Swedish sprats. They're called anchovies, but a lot of people think that it's actually anchovies, which are stored in oil. But anchovies are actually pickled brined sprats, which is kind of similar to herring, but a small fish. And it has some like cloves and allspice that it's pickled with. So it's a very different sort of thing. If you see like Baltic sprats, which are actually smoked, they're completely different. So if you're looking for something that is close to the Swedish sprat fillets, the anchovies, pickled herring is actually going to be your closest bet. And I have spent hours on the internet trying to decipher the best thing to use as a substitute and what the real difference is and trying to get them. I used to be able to find the real Swedish anchovies locally, but I cannot anymore. And the only place I could find them was on Amazon for way too expensive. All right, I've got our tablespoon and a half of dill and our tablespoon and a half of chives. Just throw that right in. We have our Lars Swedish mustard, which if you can't find at your local grocery store, this is another one of those great things that you can find at Open House Imports in Mount Horeb. They've got a lot of great Swedish specialty items, both a small grocery and lots of other just really fun stuff. And for this, we need, what is it? Just over a tablespoon. And so, or sorry, teaspoon, just over a teaspoon. And that will be fine there. A very specific measured squirt. I've got some mustard on my finger. Pardon me while I grab a paper towel. All right. Now we can grab our Kalles caviar with our happy little Swedish boy. And we need a teaspoon of that. So it is, like I said, this smoked cod roe, and then it is creamed, or as you can see, just nice and pureed to a nice paste. And all right, just going down my list here, we got our eggs, onion, I'll chop up in just a moment here, capers, mayo, Swedish mustard. Oh, we need some salt and pepper. That's really kind of by taste. It sort of depends on how salty your fish is and how much mustard you put in. That can definitely affect that. So a few cranks of fresh pepper. For starters, we'll just do, let's say, like a half a teaspoon of salt. And now I'm just going to set this to the side. Got my onion. So the way I've got my onion prepared here, obviously it's peeled. On the root end, you can see that I've just barely shaved off the dirt end off of it. So the root still has everything intact. And then just cut off the very top of it. So for dicing, a great way to do it is actually to have your hand on top of it like that. So I have my hand is sort of like, I've got my fingers splayed out like that. And I just have my palm is holding it flat. So I can just cut straight back to that root. So at that point, just cut like that. And this is for a dice. If you were just going to chop, you wouldn't need to do that first part. But then just going, make sure it's centered my camera here. Just going across, you just cut across the top. Again, just getting to that root. You can see that this whole thing is still really being held together by that root. But you've got across here, you've got across here. And now, as long as you get your slices nice and close together, you've got your perfect little squares. It always kind of drives me nuts when you see somebody cutting an onion and they just sort of roughly go, chop, chop, chop all over it. And then they come back and they just keep cutting more and more and more and more until it is the right size, but you've got quite the collection of shapes. And I mean, if that works for you, that's fine. I'm not picking on you, but I'm just one of those crazy people that, I like to have all these pretty squares. And then you're really just left with this little piece here, which, a lot of people just cut that off to begin with and just chop away at it. But that whole thing held it in place. And then that we can just throw right into our compost. And that was half an onion, which it says, but not going to lie, that was a pretty big onion. I mean, you can see for the amount that I have in here and for that pile there, that would be a little over the top on onion. So we'll say, call it a quarter. And I'll just set that to the side. I'll put it in this bowl here. If I decide I want to put in more onion, I'll put in more onion. And if you're not a fan of that raw onion flavor, but you do like, you know, some subtle onion, you could absolutely saute this. Saute the onion, just the onion, and that would help soften it. Now we just mix it up. And with anything that has like this many bold flavors in it, at first they're really going to kind of be all competing to be that dominant flavor. And that can be a little much at first. But definitely after 2 hours, and for sure the next day, it'll be mellowed out. All the flavors are gonna marry and be playing real friendly together. And there is that. That's looking good to me. You can see it's a bit chunky. That is the way this particular dish is supposed to be. But hey, it's food. How do you like it? If you like it to be a little creamier, by all means, add in some more creme fraiche or sour cream, mayonnaise, you know, whatever works for you. And if it, you know, maybe you like a little bit more mustard, hit it with some more mustard. But with the main flavors that you've got in there, be careful of adjusting those too much right away, because again, it will change in a couple hours, or especially overnight. And you really want to make sure that you don't, you know, you'll want to do any major changes after it's mellowed out for a bit. So, I mean, for now, I'm just going to give it a quick taste just for salt and pepper, because, you know, that's pretty basic. That's not really going to change. Spot on. When this happens, it makes me super happy, because it's like I just said, I know it's going to be so much better in a couple hours or even tomorrow. But like right there is just like, that is fantastic. Now I'm excited for tomorrow when I get to try it again, because it's going to be even better. All right, well, we've got a few minutes left on our timer for our soup. Going to give it a quick stir. How are you guys able to find? Did everybody find all the ingredients that they needed, or were there some substitutes? I know, for example, like that celeriac. I mean, this is, you know, one of my favorite things. This knotty, gnarly looking root. I mean, it's just, you know, it smells so strongly of celery, being the root, of course, but it just has this amazing earthy, sweet flavor to it that, I mean, you know, again, one of my favorite things to do is just have it as a side and just, you know, peel it, cut it up, steam it, and then just mix it like you were mixing mashed potatoes, and just puree it with all your dairy fats and your salt and pepper. It's really all you need for seasoning. You know, there's no point in getting fancy with the garlic or anything like that. It's just so simple, creamy, beautiful flavor. So hopefully we were able to find celeriac. It's one of those things that I usually need to call one of my farmer friends if I can't, you know, find it in Madison. Sometimes it's at Woodman's. They usually have it at Whole Foods, but I really like that one. So yeah. How did you guys do with finding ingredients? Was there stuff that you really had trouble finding?
Well, I couldn't find the celeriac, but it's great without it, so I don't really miss it.
Yeah, it's one of those things you can definitely just use. A very finely minced celery will work. You'll get that same celery flavor that it lends to it, but using this, the way it kind of like melts into it, you know, you won't be chewing on the celery as you would if you just used the celery. What about you, Amanda?
Next time.
We had a hard time with the yellow peas, so we got green instead.
That works. That absolutely works. All right, well, I'm I just want to taste the stock. Obviously, the peas aren't going to be there yet. But it just, I love the color that I've got on there. This smells good. You can also tell it just has that slight smell of not raw peas, but dried peas that hasn't fully cooked yet. This is going to be good. I'm looking forward to that. All right. Well, you might want to make a note in your recipe for the Gubbrora that, you know, half of a small onion, because I'd hate for you guys to ruin it by being like, I made the recipe like he said, but it's half onion. So yeah, definitely make that adjustment. Otherwise, my spoons are out of curiosity. I'm here. I'm just going to see where the peas are. I can see that they're starting to. Oh, there's my dinger. Yep, they still got a little bit to go. I'm definitely glad I went with the split peas. Otherwise, I know that if it was just the whole peas, they would be still quite hard. Another reason that I did go with these is I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to find the whole yellow peas in time. I did have some. I had quite the stockpile since I do so much stuff for Folklore Village. I would, you know, buy a case of those yellow peas at a time. I had a lot of ingredients last year for international foods that I had planned on using at Folklore Village that I found that I just had. It's like, these are going to be expired by the end of the year before I'm doing Folklore Village events again. So that stuff just made its way into my kitchen, and I was down to one last bag of those yellow peas, and they did expire last year. It's like, well, for me, I'm not worried about that. And no lie, I cooked those things for almost 4 hours, and they just would not fully soften. They were, you know, close. I'd say for the last 2 hours, they were close, but for that first hour, it's like a little more done, and then they just plateaued there at like al dente dried peas, which is definitely not as good as it does not sound. We're just, my oldest and my wife were very sweet, and they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is good. But the rest of us were, no, that's okay. I didn't blame anybody for not wanting to have that one. So yes, just wanting to get done on time. These are actually brand new. Like I said, I was able to get from Open House Imports. And yeah, these are good till January 2023. So, and who knows, maybe I'll take this soup. It's not on the menu at Folklore Village tomorrow, but who knows, maybe I'll take this other bag and I'll make that up with another batch of soup. And, you know, I've got all this extra celery. Who knows? I've got one other person to help me get dinner going. If we get bored, we'll make some more soup for you and throw that on the menu, because why not?
I'll add soup spoons to our silverware rolls.
I mean, you got a spoon. A spoon is a spoon.
Right.
Fine. You know, it's not like it's.
It gets it to your mouth.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something like chili where you really need that like big spoon to get, you know, everything in there. You know, it's there's a lot that goes into this soup, but by the time it's all done cooking itself down and everything, it's one of those, if you want, when it comes to the end, you can, if you want to just go straight smooth with it, you can just puree the whole thing with like an immersion blender. If you just want to add some body to it, but don't want to fully puree it, a good thing to do is just take some out, puree that, and then put it back in. And that way you leave any of the, you know, the bits in there that you want to be intact, you know, as is, while also adding some body to it. You can, you know, take some out, puree it, put it back in. The difference between that and just taking like an immersion blender and just giving it a couple of bzz, bzz, you know, it's kind of inconsistent. You know, if you want some of those bigger pieces in there, it'll kind of, instead of giving you like your bigger pieces and then your completely smooth pieces, it kind of then gives you this like third layer in the middle where it's just like big half kind of chopped and smooth. Again, that's not a big deal, but I'm a crazy person and I have very specific ideas in my mind when I'm approaching a dish of exactly how I want it to turn out in the end. And my staff has gotten used to that. A lot of times they, you know, not question me, but more of like, are you sure you want to do it that? Like, this would be easier. And it's like, yes, you are correct. That would be easier. However, we're going to do it this way because it's just going to add to the dish as a whole. And, you know, I don't always do that at home because, you know, I'm not always trying to impress the kids. But, you know, if I'm doing an event, you know, I think it's really always worth going that extra mile just to, you know, not do it the way that I might just do it at home if I was worried about, well, I'm going to have 5 extra dishes to do if I do this extra step. It's like, well, I've got a dishwashing sink here and a commercial dishwasher, so do the extra step. Make it that little bit better. But anyway, are there any questions about anything we've gone over up to this point? Good. I am glad. Are there any questions about Swedish cooking, Swedish food in general? I know off the top of your head, it's like, oh, I don't know. I'm just waiting for this soup to do its thing. So if you have any questions about food at all,
what's your favorite food?
what's my favorite food?
Yeah.
So I'm getting spammed in the middle of this. Oh, that is a hard one. I mean, once upon a time, I just would have said like bacon, steak, one of those two, steak wrapped in bacon. But I mean, that was before I really got into making, you know, food from scratch with locally sourced ingredients, things, you know, from your neighbor's garden or your friend the farmer who's, you know, playing with new ingredients. I mean, that is a really good question and one I was not prepared to answer. I mean, it's a day by day changing thing. I mean, if we just say like, let's say favorite dish, I would have to say ramen. Only because it's almost a cheater answer, because you can do so many different things with ramen that ramen can be, you know, whatever you want it to be, whatever you're in the mood for kind of thing. But it's one of the things that's great about it is it's just so very different than, you know, most of our Western palates are used to. It just has ingredients that we're not familiar with and just flavors that we weren't raised with. So it's just new and interesting, and you can go so many different ways with it that, I mean, in its essence, it's basically just, you know, Japanese chicken noodle soup. But, you know, it's just completely different. You can do so many things with it, and it's just a whole lot of fun. I make it at home all the time. I mean, my kids always get really excited when they see me making ramen and getting the bowls all set up and everything, because, you know, they don't know exactly what style it's going to be, but they're going to know it's going to have a great broth, some great noodles. And, you know, I usually like to do some sort of pickled vegetable along with something, you know, steamed or sauteed on there. And it's just a really fun way to play with food and make it very beautiful, the way you can like arrange it on top and everything. It's a lot of fun. What about you? What's your favorite food?
Ramen noodles.
Yeah, for real.
I love to talk.
Awesome.
I'm interested in learning new recipes.
What's that?
I'm interested in learning new recipes. I like cooking.
No, absolutely. Yeah, if your mom doesn't have my email address already, I mean, you can find it at redbarncatering.com, or it's just the letter J period Miller at RedBarn Catering. And absolutely, I mean, I'm one of those people that is incapable of just taking somebody else's recipe and just making it, because I always have some weird thing that I want to do with it. And, you know, one of the great things that I love about, you know, like growing up at Folklore Village and cooking there and having all of these different cultures, like with Midwinter Festival, where it's, you know, a different culture for every meal. You know, I really have learned so much from that, you know, in somebody's recipe that, you know, something that's, you know, maybe straight African recipe, I'll, you know, look at and be like, well, that's really great, but, you know, have you considered, you know, this ingredient from northern China that would pair so well with this? And I would just sort of fold it in there without saying anything, just to kind of enhance the dish as a whole. And so all the recipes that I write, I've got about 800 in my computer that I've written over the years. You know, they all have all sorts of different ingredients and techniques that I use to really enhance every ingredient individually, while also helping them all come together in a way that they, you know, they complement each other. When you talk about complementary and contrasting flavors, generally speaking, within a single dish, I don't like to go contrasting. I like the flavors in a single dish to be very complementary, but then having, you know, a side item to that maybe contrast that item as a whole. So one mouthful isn't necessarily going to be like all over the place vying for attention, but, you know, everything here will go really well together. Everything here will go really well together, but, you know, they may kind of play off each other in fun and interesting ways. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to teach you recipes, and yeah, absolutely. All right.
I have a question here, Jay, from Amanda, asking if you can repeat how you freeze ginger root.
You open up the freezer and you chuck it in. If you want to if you want it to last a little longer, I mean, put it in a Ziploc freezer bag. I mean, that always helps, but there's been enough times when I get home, I've got an insane amount of groceries, and I take it, and it's like, I only bought this because I'm out. I don't actually need it for anything now, and I just chuck it in the freezer, and then it's like a week later, I'm like, oh yeah, it's in the freezer. It's fine. At that point, I'll put it in a Ziploc bag, but that's really it. And then you can just use the, like I was saying before, like the back of a spoon while it's frozen, take it out, and, you know, just like pick an end. I don't usually like snap off the knobs because I like to have the whole thing to hold on to. And so I'll just, you know, at the bottom of a knob, just scrape off the skin on it. It comes up when it's frozen. The skin is actually softer than the ginger itself, so it actually comes off pretty easily. And then if you've got a microplane, that works really well. Otherwise, even just like a box grater, using those, you know, the really small fine holes, just grating that, and it just grates incredibly easy, and it'll last for a very, very long time. So yeah, absolutely. Ginger is one of those things. It's like, it holds in the freezer so well that it's a great flavor. Like, why not just keep it in the freezer? I mean, I very seldomly use powdered ginger anymore, dried ginger, just because it's so readily available and easy in the freezer. I mean, yes, it isn't the cheapest thing, but it holds so well. So, all right. Let's look down into our pot. That is looking pretty good. So we're getting some nice body out of this. You can see the peas have broken up just a bit, so it's kind of thickened things up a bit. Here's our rosemary stick, has cleaned itself off very nicely. I'm just gonna quick give a taste. I'm gonna get some stock in there along with a few peas. At this point, I'm really just going for salt and pepper. Mm-hmm. Now, that is real good. But if you want to hit it with a bit of pepper. And a little bit of salt. One thing that is good for people to know that I see a lot of people do, if you're ever wondering why your salt is getting clumpy, it's because of humidity. So if you ever have your salt, I've got the cap on it right now, but if you've got like a pot or something steaming and you take your salt and you go right over it and you shake your salt into it, you're getting a lot of steam and humidity in there, and that's going to clump up your salt. So that's why a lot of times, you know, the only thing I really use this like little table salt shakers for is, you know, either at the table or if I'm making popcorn. Otherwise, I'm usually using one of these, and I'll pour it from here into the cap, and then I'll chuck it in. It's also a really good way to make sure you don't accidentally pour in too much, because I know we've all been there where you've got it and you're dumping it right into the pot, and all of a sudden, bam, it hits it, and you're like, oh no, and you're grabbing a spoon and trying to like get it out of there before the bubbles fold it in, and you got to worry about trying to find a big old raw potato to throw in there and try to soak out some salt. Okay, so I added some salt. That's what I did. Let's see where we are with it now. And again, with the final consistency of it, it's really up to you. You can go straight, smooth puree. I generally like it where it's got, you know, kind of that middle ground that I was talking about, where you take some out, you puree it, put it back in, and then you've got some that's like whole, and it's also got a very nice smooth texture to it. And that is where I wanted to see it with the salt. Okay. So, just to recap, we've got butter, bacon, onion, grated ginger, garlic, our Swedish yellow peas or split peas, our celeriac, leeks, rosemary, bay leaf, and our chicken stock. You may notice the recipe said basically chicken, beef, pork, vegetable, whatever you want to use. Traditionally, this was actually made with a pork stock that would be left over from like, you know, roasting, you know, some pork, and the jus that you'd get from that, you'd be able to use for this. I generally like to use chicken stock just because chicken stock is golden, the peas are yellow, and it just really gives you a very beautiful flavor, and the color, well, the beautiful flavor, beautiful color. It's really nice to do. The last time I made this just for home, I'd never used a beef stock before. I gave it a go. It was delicious. I mean, it tasted different because it was beef stock, but it definitely was a much muddier color. It wasn't as pretty, although it was definitely beautiful. So now we get to the part where we want to finish it. This is delicious. I mean, it's got all the flavors going on, and I love it. But, you know, it kind of has that taste of things that have been cooking for a while. So this is the point where I like to do our, what I always call the finishers. So, I mean, that's things that are bright flavors, fresh flavors. A lot of times I do things with what I'm doing here today with fresh herbs are always a great way to go. If you see a recipe that starts off like add fresh herbs and cook for 2 hours, it's like, no. I mean, unless it's like a bay leaf or rosemary that really need a long time to cook, you want to add those at the end. Too soon, and the flavors are just completely lost. So I do have sage, thyme, and parsley that I just ran out in the garden and grabbed. So I guess there is now officially parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme in here, which, hey, Go Garfunkel. There's different ways, there's different mustards that you can use. When I'm doing something like this, I actually really like to use like a whole grain mustard that, is just like whole mustard seeds in it. I mean, you get the great, basically mustard sauce that it's in, but then, as you're eating it, you get to pop into those tender little mustard seeds because, they're cooked, they're nice and soft, but they're intact. So you get to, like I said, give them a little pop while you eat them. So we'll go with a good, healthy couple teaspoons there. And smoked paprika. Smoked paprika. Come here. Forgive me, I had the smoked paprika was a whole 8 steps away. Pensies, hooray, pensies. I am a fan. And nice teaspoon of that. So that's a nice smoky flavor. Gonna add just a little bit of color to it. And I've already adjusted it with my sea salt and fresh ground pepper. I mean, fresh ground pepper is definitely the way to go. And instantly, I mean, it smelled amazing a moment ago, but now with these extra flavors in there, I mean, it hits you in the most amazing way. I mean, I'm good with this right here. I mean, it was already good before I put that stuff in. I do have sour cream mixed with chives on the recipe. I brought all of my groceries to Folklore Village the other day, and of course I got here to the kitchen and I said, oh right, I did not bring the sour cream back to the kitchen here. But I do always have some creme fraiche on standby because you never know when you're like, you know what, this needs creme fraiche. So we can just put a dollop of that on there. And we're gonna just hit it with our chives. I mean, you can mix it in. There's also something to be said for how pretty it is just to have a little bit right there on top. And you know what? I mean, I was just in the garden grabbing herbs and stuff. Why not grab some parsley there too? And that is looking pretty good to me. And I'm gonna grab one more thing quick. Just to finish it off. We gotta have our Swedish rye crisp. I was so sad I couldn't find the giant rounds when I was picking them out. It's one of the things I love about the Swedish rye crisp is these giant round rye crackers, but these will do as well. So I've got my Gubbrora here. Just gonna throw a spoonful on here. Gubbrora on a rye crisp. All right. I purposely didn't taste it after I added in all of those finishers just because I knew they were going to add a lot. I wanted to wait till all of it was together. Yes. Yes, happy meat. That is, it's just got everything going on. I mean, just from the ground up with the bacon, the onions and ginger, and the garlic. Garlic usually isn't in a lot of Swedish recipes, but I usually end up folding it in just because it's good. But all that, the stock, the peas, You get that earthy sweetness from the celeriac in there. I mean, that's a good bowl of soup right there. Those finishers at the end. I mean, getting that creme fraiche, the creamy, the mustard and those fresh herbs really just give it that brightness for it. That, like I said, it was already delicious, but it was missing that brightness from that long cooking time. And it just, you get the creamy, the tart, the brightness, and those are the elements that I look for in a soup. You know, starting off with a good technique that's going to give you a good rich flavor, but then when it's done, not just saying, well, everything's cooked through, so it's done, you know, remembering to give it those finishing touches. Let's go back to our old man's mix. I almost feel like it needs more onion now. I think I might add in just a little bit more to that. But that's why we taste and keep it aside. Well, I'm very happy with what I've got in front of me. How'd you guys do? Good, good. I see smiling faces. That's a good sign. All right, well, are there any final questions about anything at all? No?
How long have you been cooking professionally?
Professionally, that would be about 17 years. Yeah, I've been cooking under like my own name. I basically started catering myself in 2007. I'd obviously already been cooking for a long time before that, before I decided to get into catering. But it took me from 2007 to 2012 to figure out the name RedBarn Catering, because just I couldn't think of a name that sounded right. I didn't just want it to be like Jay Miller makes you food kind of thing, you know. I didn't want to put my ego into it, so I figured if my name was there in the title, you know, there would be that level of ego that I just didn't want to have in my business. And beyond that, I mean, I started cooking at Schubert's restaurant in Mount Horeb when I was 16, and worked at all sorts of different places, restaurants where I was, you know, everything from a busboy, you know, at little holes in the wall, to executive chef at a restaurant in Platteville, sous chef at a restaurant in Galena. And, you know, I really enjoyed all the different things that I was learning and everything. But really, I was, you know, the restaurant life can be pretty hard on you. And I was in my early 20s feeling pretty burned out with the whole thing. And unfortunately, a lot of restaurant environments are unfortunately just toxic places. But, you know, ever since I've been doing things, you know, the way that I want to, you know, without feeling a daily strain of what's going to happen. Yeah, I really enjoy catering, and it's a whole lot of fun. Well, if there's nothing else.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. Thank you guys all for joining us. Like we've said, this is Folklore Village's Fall Swedish Weekend. It's the first hybrid virtual and in-person event that we've ever done. So we're really glad that you could join us tonight. Meals are at the heart of a lot of our festivals, so this is a really great way to kick off the weekend. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you guys enjoy your meals.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.